The screams started at exactly 8:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the grandfather clock in the hallway when Robert's voice shattered the peaceful silence of the mansion like glass breaking against stone. "Patricia! Help me! Something's wrong!" His voice came from the kitchen, raw and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. The sound made my blood freeze in my veins. I was still holding the delicate china cup in my hands, the one with tiny pink roses painted around the rim, the same cup that had been meant for me just 30 minutes ago. I dropped the cup. It crashed to the marble floor, hot chocolate splashing everywhere, but I barely noticed. My feet were already moving toward the kitchen, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Patricia! Oh God! Patricia!" Robert's screams were getting worse, more panicked. There was something animal about them now, like a wounded creature trapped in a cage. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and stopped dead. Robert was on the floor, writhing like someone had set him on fire from the inside. His usually neat gray hair was soaked with sweat, sticking to his forehead in dark streaks. His face was twisted in agony, mouth open wide as another scream tore from his throat. His hands clutched his stomach, fingers digging into his shirt so hard I thought he might tear right through the fabric. "Robert!" I rushed toward him, but Patricia was already there, kneeling beside her husband. Her perfectly styled blonde hair had come loose from its neat bun, strands falling around her face as she hovered over him. "What's happening to him?" I asked, dropping to my knees on the other side of Robert. "Should I call 911? Patricia's head snapped up, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. It wasn't concern or fear like I expected. It was rage. Pure, burning rage directed straight at me. "This is your fault," she hissed, her voice so low and venomous I almost didn't catch the words. "What?" I stared at her, confused. "Patricia, what are you talking about? We need to help him!" Robert let out another agonizing scream, his back arching off the kitchen tiles. Foam was starting to form at the corners of his mouth, white and frothy. His eyes rolled back, showing mostly white, and his whole body began to shake violently. "You switched the cups," Patricia said, and now her voice was getting louder, more hysterical. "You switched them? That was supposed to be yours!" The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs all at once. "What did you say?" "The hot chocolate!" Patricia was screaming now, her composure completely shattered. "You switched the cups! You weren't supposed to!" Robert wasn't supposed to. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. My mind raced back to 30 minutes ago. Patricia in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared 3 cups of hot chocolate. The way she'd been so careful about which cup went where, making sure I got the one with the pink roses. The strange smell that had made my nose wrinkle when I brought it close to my lips. That bitter, almond-like scent that didn't belong in chocolate. I had switched cups with Robert when Patricia stepped out to answer the phone. Something about that smell had made every instinct in my body scream danger. So when she wasn't looking, I'd quickly swapped my cup with Robert's plain white one. "You tried to poison me," I whispered, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. "You actually tried to poison me." Patricia lunged at me across Robert's convulsing body, her manicured nails aimed at my face. "You ruined everything, everything. He wasn't supposed to drink it. It was meant for you." I scrambled backward, my hands slipping on the smooth kitchen tiles. Patricia's face was twisted with a hatred so intense it didn't even look human anymore. This wasn't the sweet, smiling woman who had handed me that cup of hot chocolate with such care. This was someone else entirely, someone who had been hiding behind that perfect mask. 30 years! She shrieked, still trying to reach me while Robert writhed between us. 30 years I've been married to him, and you were going to ruin it all. With your inheritance, your influence over Thomas, you were going to take everything from me. Robert's screams were getting weaker now, more like whimpers. His movements were becoming less violent, but somehow that was even more terrifying. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling 911, I said, my voice barely steady. "Don't you dare." Patricia tried to grab my phone, but I was already dialing. 911, What's your emergency? I need an ambulance, I said, my words tumbling over each other. My father-in-law has been poisoned, he's convulsing, and there's foam coming from his mouth. Please hurry. Patricia collapsed beside Robert, her anger suddenly replaced by panic. Robert, baby, stay with me. Please stay with me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But even as she cried over her husband, I could see her mind working, calculating. She was already planning her next move, figuring out how to spin this story. How to make herself the victim instead of the woman who had just tried to murder her daughter-in-law. I stayed on the line with the 911 operator, answering their questions while keeping my distance from Patricia. My whole body was shaking now as the reality of what had almost happened crashed over me like a wave. If I hadn't switched those cups, it would be me on that kitchen floor right now. It would be me screaming in agony while poison coursed through my veins. Patricia had smiled so sweetly when she handed me that cup, her eyes twinkling with what I thought was affection. But it hadn't been affection at all. It had been anticipation. 3 days earlier, I had been looking forward to this weekend visit. Thomas had to fly to Chicago for an important client meeting, and I thought spending time with his parents might help bridge the gap that always seemed to exist between Patricia and me. I was so naive. The mansion looked like something from a magazine as I pulled up the circular driveway, perfectly manicured gardens, gleaming windows, and not a single thing out of place, just like Patricia herself. She was waiting on the front steps before I even turned off the engine, wearing a cream-colored sweater set in pearls, her blonde hair styled in that perfect way that never seemed to move. "Alex, darling," she called out, her arms spread wide as I got out of the car. "I'm so excited you're here. It's going to be just us girls this weekend." The way she said just us girls made something twist in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling away. I was being paranoid. Patricia was Thomas's mother, and she loved him. That had to count for something. She hugged me tightly, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. Everything about Patricia was expensive. Her clothes, her jewelry, her car, even the way she spoke with that slight accent that I could never quite place. Thomas once told me she'd grown up poor in Ohio, but you'd never know it now. "Come in! Come in!" She practically pulled me toward the front door. Robert's in his study working, as usual. That man never stops, but we'll have plenty of time to catch up. The inside of the house was just as perfect as the outside. Marble floors so shiny I could see my reflection, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my car, and fresh flowers in every room. It felt more like a museum than a home. "I've put you in the blue guest room," Patricia said, leading me up the grand staircase. "I know it's your favorite." It wasn't my favorite. I'd never told her I had a favorite room, but I smiled and nodded anyway. The blue guest room was beautiful, with antique furniture and a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a castle. Patricia had already been here, I realized. My suitcase was on the bed, but it had been moved. The zipper was in a different position than when I'd packed it. "I took the liberty of hanging up a few of your things," Patricia said, noticing my stare. "I didn't want them to wrinkle." I opened the closet and saw my clothes hanging there, but they'd been rearranged. My favorite blue dress, the one Thomas said brought out my eyes, was pushed to the very back behind clothes I rarely wore. "Thank you," I said, though something felt wrong about her going through my things. "Oh, and I moved your toiletries to the bathroom. I noticed you used that drugstore shampoo." She wrinkled her nose slightly. "I put some of my products out for you to try. Much better for your hair type." "My hair type?" I touched my brown waves self-consciously. Thomas always said he loved my hair, but Patricia made it sound like there was something wrong with it. We went downstairs for tea, and Patricia settled into her usual spot on the white sofa. Everything in the living room was white or cream-colored. I always felt like I was going to spill something and ruin it. "So tell me, dear, how are things with you and Thomas?" she asked, pouring tea from a delicate china set. "Good, really good. He's been working hard, but we're happy." "That's wonderful." Her smile was bright, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know, I was just thinking about Veronica the other day." My stomach dropped. Veronica was Thomas's ex-girlfriend, the one he'd dated for 3 years before we met. Patricia brought her up at least once every time I visited. "She called last week, actually. She's doing so well. Just got promoted to partner at her law firm. And she bought the most beautiful house in the hills. You should see the pictures she sent." I sipped my tea and said nothing. What was I supposed to say? That I was glad Thomas's ex was successful? That I wished I could afford a house in the hills too? "She comes from such a good family," Patricia continued. "Her father is a judge, you know, and her mother sits on the board of the children's hospital. They've been friends of ours for years." Unlike me, she didn't say, but the words hung in the air anyway. My father was a mechanic, and my mother worked at the grocery store. Good people, but not the kind Patricia thought belonged in her world. "Thomas seems very happy," I said quietly. "Oh, he does, doesn't he?" Patricia's voice was bright again. "Though I do worry sometimes. Marriage is such a big step, so permanent. I just want to make sure he's making the right choice." The right choice, as if I was a decision he might regret. Robert appeared in the doorway then, saving me from having to respond. He was a kind man with gentle eyes and graying hair, nothing like his wife's sharp edges. "Alex!" He came over and gave me a warm hug. "How's my favorite daughter-in-law?" "I'm your only daughter-in-law." I laughed, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Well, that just makes you even more special." He winked at me and turned to Patricia. "Have you been taking good care of our guest?" "Of course I have," Patricia said, but there was something tight in her voice. "We've been having a lovely chat about Thomas and his future." Robert raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He grabbed a cookie from the tray and headed back toward his study. "I'll let you ladies continue your visit. Dinner at 7? After he left, Patricia's smile returned, but it felt different now, sharper somehow. "Robert adores you," she said. "He thinks Thomas is so lucky to have found someone so genuine." The way she said genuine made it sound like an insult. "I love Thomas very much," I said. "I'm sure you do, dear. I'm sure you do." But her eyes said she didn't believe me at all. The first strange thing I noticed was Patricia's computer. It was the next morning, and I'd come downstairs early to make coffee. Patricia was still in her room getting ready, and Robert had already left for his Saturday golf game. The house felt different when it was quiet, less like a showpiece and more like a place where people actually lived. I was walking past Patricia's small office when I saw the glow of her computer screen through the half-open door. She must have forgotten to turn it off. I wouldn't have looked, but something about the web page caught my eye. The words were big and bold across the top of the screen. "Untraceable household poisons. A complete guide." My blood went cold. I stepped closer, my heart starting to race. The page was full of information about different substances, their effects, how long they took to work, and most importantly, how to make poisoning look like natural causes. I heard footsteps upstairs and quickly backed away from the door. By the time Patricia came down in her perfectly pressed outfit, I was in the kitchen pretending to read a magazine. "Good morning, darling," she said brightly. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." I tried to keep my voice normal, but my hands were shaking as I turned the pages. "I thought we could go shopping today. There's a lovely boutique downtown that just got in their fall collection, my treat of course." Shopping was the last thing I wanted to do, but I nodded anyway. Maybe getting out of the house would help me think clearly. Maybe I was overreacting. People researched all kinds of things online. It didn't necessarily mean anything. But as the day went on, I noticed more things that made my skin crawl. When Patricia went to get her purse, I quickly checked her computer again. The browser history had been cleared completely. Every single page had been deleted. At the boutique, Patricia insisted on buying me a dress that was completely wrong for me. It was expensive and beautiful, but it made me look washed out and plain. When I tried to politely decline, she became almost aggressive about it. "Nonsense, you look lovely, Thomas will adore it." But her eyes said something different. They said she wanted me to look bad. On the way home, she stopped at the pharmacy. "Just need to pick up a few things," she said. But she made me wait in the car. Through the window, I watched her talking intensely with the pharmacist, pointing at something behind the counter. When she came back, she had a small bag that she quickly shoved into her purse. "What did you get?" I asked casually. "Oh, just some vitamins. Robert's been feeling run down lately." But when we got home, I saw her take the bag straight to the kitchen pantry, instead of the medicine cabinet where they kept all their other pills. That evening, Robert came home from golf in a great mood. "How were my two favorite ladies today?" he asked, kissing Patricia on the cheek and giving me a hug. "We had a wonderful time," Patricia said. "Didn't we, Alex?" I forced a smile. Yes, it was nice. During dinner, Patricia kept steering the conversation toward money. She asked about my job at the marketing firm, how much I was making, whether I had any savings. When I mentioned that my grandmother had left me a small inheritance, Patricia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. An inheritance? How lovely. Thomas didn't mention it. "It's not much," I said quickly. "Just enough to help with a down payment on a house someday." "A house?" Patricia's voice was sharp. "You and Thomas are thinking of buying a house?" "Maybe eventually. We've talked about it." The look that passed between Patricia and Robert was impossible to miss. Robert seemed pleased, but Patricia looked like I'd just slapped her. After dinner, I excused myself to call Thomas. I needed to hear his voice, needed some connection to normalcy. But when I went to get my phone from my purse, I found it in a different pocket than where I'd left it. The call log showed that someone had been looking through it. "Thomas?" I said when he answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, beautiful. How's the visit going?" "Fine," I lied. "I miss you." "I miss you too. Mom treating you well?" I wanted to tell him everything. About the computer, the pharmacy, the way his mother looked at me like she was planning something terrible. But how could I? He'd think I was crazy. Patricia was his mother. She'd raised him, loved him, been there his whole life. I was just the woman he'd known for 2 years. "She's been very attentive," I said instead. "Good. I know she can be a little overwhelming sometimes, but she means well. She just wants what's best for our family." Our family. The words should have made me happy, but instead they filled me with dread. After I hung up, I decided to go to bed early. But as I was brushing my teeth, I heard voices from downstairs. Patricia was on the phone with someone, and her voice was different, harder, more calculating. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "It needs to look like an accident," she was saying. "Something that could happen to anyone. Food poisoning maybe, or a heart condition. She's mentioned having heart palpitations from stress." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it downstairs. "No, Robert doesn't suspect anything. He thinks she's wonderful, of course. Men are so easily fooled." There was a pause. "The inheritance changes everything. If she influences Thomas to cut ties with us, we'll lose everything. The house, the lifestyle, all of it. I won't let some little nobody destroy what I've built." I backed away from the stairs, my whole body shaking. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't my imagination. Patricia was planning to hurt me, and she was planning to make it look like an accident. I had to get out of here. But how could I leave without making her suspicious? And who would believe me if I tried to explain? I was trapped in this beautiful house with a woman who wanted me dead. Sunday evening arrived like a storm cloud I could see coming, but couldn't escape. I'd spent the entire day trying to act normal, while my mind raced through escape plans. I could fake being sick and leave early. I could call Thomas and make up an emergency. I could just pack my bags and go. But every time I started to move toward any of these options, Patricia appeared. She seemed to be watching me constantly now, her bright smile never wavering, but her eyes following my every movement like a predator tracking prey. "I thought we'd have a quiet evening in," she announced after Robert finished his afternoon nap. "Just the 3 of us. I'll make my famous hot chocolate." The way she said famous hot chocolate made my skin crawl. I'd never heard her mention it before, and we'd certainly never had it during any of my previous visits. "That sounds lovely," Robert said, settling into his favorite armchair with the Sunday paper. "I haven't had your hot chocolate in years, Patricia." "Well, tonight's special," she said, her eyes fixed on me. "A family tradition I want to share with Alex." I wanted to scream that I wasn't hungry, that I was feeling sick, that I needed to leave right now. But the words stuck in my throat. If I acted suspicious now, what would she do? Would she try something else? Something I couldn't see coming? "I'll help you make it," I offered, thinking that if I was in the kitchen with her, I could see what she was doing. "Oh no, darling, you're our guest. Just relax with Robert. I'll take care of everything." She practically pushed me toward the living room, and I had no choice but to sit on the white sofa and pretend to read a magazine while my heart hammered against my ribs. From the kitchen came the sounds of Patricia moving around, opening cabinets, running water, the gentle clink of dishes, normal sounds that should have been comforting but instead filled me with terror. "She's been so excited about this weekend," Robert said, looking up from his paper. "I haven't seen her this happy in months." Happy. That's what he called the manic energy that had been radiating from his wife all day. "She's been very welcoming," I managed. "Patricia can be intense sometimes, but her heart's in the right place. She just wants what's best for Thomas, for all of us." I nodded and tried to smile, but inside, I was screaming. Robert had no idea what his wife was really like. He saw the perfect hostess, the devoted mother, the loving wife. He didn't see the woman who researched poisons online or made mysterious phone calls about accidents. "Hot chocolate's ready!" Patricia's voice rang out from the kitchen, sweet as sugar. She appeared in the doorway, carrying a silver tray with 3 delicate china cups. Each cup was different. Mine had tiny pink roses painted around the rim, Robert's was plain white, and Patricia's had small blue flowers. "I remember you mentioning how much you love floral patterns," Patricia said, handing me the rose cup. "I thought you'd appreciate this one." I'd never mentioned anything about floral patterns. In fact, I usually preferred simple, modern designs. But I took the cup with trembling hands and forced another smile. The hot chocolate was dark and rich, with a perfect swirl of whipped cream on top. It looked delicious. It smelled wrong. While Patricia's and Robert's cups had the warm, sweet scent of chocolate and vanilla, mine had something else underneath, something bitter and sharp that made my nose wrinkle. It reminded me of almonds, but not the pleasant kind you'd find in cookies. This was harsh, chemical-like. "Aren't you going to try it?" Patricia asked, settling into her chair with her own cup. She hadn't taken a sip yet, I noticed. She was waiting, watching me with those bright, predatory eyes. "It smells wonderful," I said, bringing the cup closer to my lips. The bitter scent got stronger, making my stomach turn. Robert took a big gulp of his chocolate and sighed contentedly. "Delicious as always, dear." Patricia beamed at him, but her eyes never left my face. "Alex, how's yours?" I pretended to take a sip, barely letting the liquid touch my lips. Even that tiny amount made my tongue tingle in an unpleasant way. It's unique," I said. "Family recipe," Patricia said. "Passed down from my grandmother. Very special ingredients." Special ingredients. The words sent ice through my veins. "I'll be right back," Patricia said suddenly, standing up. "I think I left the stove on." The moment she disappeared into the kitchen, I acted on pure instinct. My hands moved without conscious thought, switching my rose-patterned cup with Robert's plain white one. The exchange took less than 3 seconds. When Patricia returned, I was holding Robert's cup, and he had mine. She glanced at the cups and froze for just a moment, her smile flickering. But then it was back, brighter than ever. "Everything all right?" Robert asked. "Perfect," she said, but her voice was strained. "Just perfect." We sat in the living room making small talk, but the atmosphere had changed. Patricia kept checking her watch, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. She barely touched her own hot chocolate, I noticed. Every few minutes, "Mayday," her eyes would dart to me, then to Robert, then back to me. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" she asked me after about 20 minutes. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I said, though my hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the cup. "Maybe you should drink more of your chocolate. It might help settle your nerves." But I wasn't the one who needed to worry about settling anything. Robert was starting to look uncomfortable, shifting in his chair and pressing a hand to his stomach. "I think I ate too much at dinner," he said, his face looking slightly gray. Patricia's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide. "What?" "Just feeling a bit queasy. Nothing serious." But it was serious. I could see it in Patricia's face as the color drained from her cheeks. She was realizing what had happened, what I had done. The cup switch had worked. And now her husband was about to pay the price for her murderous plan. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes after I called 911. 12 minutes of Robert writhing on the kitchen floor while Patricia alternated between sobbing over him and shooting me, looks of pure hatred. 12 minutes of me standing against the wall, still clutching my phone, watching a good man suffer because his wife had tried to murder me. The paramedics rushed in with their equipment and immediately went to work. They asked rapid-fire questions while checking Robert's vital signs and starting an IV. "What did he ingest?" the lead paramedic asked. "Hot chocolate," I said before Patricia could speak, but there was something wrong with it. It smelled bitter, like almonds. The paramedic's eyes sharpened. "Cyanide poisoning. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." Patricia let out a wail that sounded more like rage than grief. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me, as they loaded Robert onto a stretcher. "You switched the cups. You did this to him." The paramedic looked between us, confused. "Ma'am, what does she mean about switching cups?" "She tried to poison me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I switched our cups because mine smelled wrong. That's why her husband drank it instead." "That's a lie!" Patricia shrieked. "She's lying! I would never! Robert, baby, I'm so sorry! I'm so sorry!" But even as she cried over the stretcher, I could see her mind working. She was already planning her defense, figuring out how to spin this story, how to make me look like the crazy one. The police arrived just as the ambulance was pulling away. Patricia rode with Robert, still playing the devastated wife, while I stayed behind to give my statement to Detective Morrison, a tired-looking man in his 50s who seemed to have seen everything. "Tell me what happened," he said, settling into Robert's armchair with a notepad. I told him everything. The computer research, the pharmacy visit, the phone call I'd overheard, the strange smell in my hot chocolate. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "Do you have any proof of these allegations?" he asked. When I finished, my heart sank. The computer history was deleted, and I don't have recordings of the phone call. "What about motive? Why would Mrs. Whitmore want to harm you?" "Money," I said. "She found out about my inheritance from my grandmother. She's afraid I'll influence Thomas to cut ties with his family financially." Detective Morrison raised an eyebrow. "How much money are we talking about?" "About $200,000. It's not a fortune, but Patricia seems to think it's enough to change everything." "And you switched the cups because of the smell?" "Yes. It was wrong. Bitter and chemical-like, nothing like chocolate should smell." He made more notes, then looked up at me. "We'll need to test the remaining hot chocolate and interview Mrs. Whitmore. Don't leave town." The next few hours passed in a blur. I called Thomas, who caught the first flight home. I sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at the white walls and trying to process what had happened. Patricia was somewhere in the building, probably still playing the grieving wife while Robert fought for his life. Thomas arrived at 3 in the morning, his hair messy and his eyes wild with panic. "Alex, are you okay? What happened?" I told him everything again, watching his face change from confusion to disbelief to horror. This was his mother I was talking about. The woman who had raised him, who had sung him lullabies and bandaged his scraped knees. "There has to be some mistake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Mom wouldn't. She couldn't. Thomas, she tried to kill me. If I hadn't switched those cups, it would be me in that hospital bed right now." He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "I knew she didn't like you," he said finally. "But I thought it was just normal mother-in-law stuff. I never imagined." Detective Morrison appeared in the waiting room doorway. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to speak with you." We followed him to a small conference room where he spread out several evidence bags on the table. "We found these in your mother-in-law's pantry," he said to Thomas. "Potassium cyanide, purchased yesterday from a chemical supply company using false credentials. We also recovered deleted files from her computer showing extensive research into untraceable poisons." Thomas stared at the evidence bags like they contained alien artifacts. "I don't understand. Why would she have these things?" "Your wife's hot chocolate tested positive for cyanide," Detective Morrison continued. "Enough to cause serious harm or death. Your father is lucky to be alive." "Is he going to be okay?" I asked. "The doctors think so. He got medical attention quickly. And the dose wasn't quite lethal. He'll be sick for a while, but he should recover fully. Thomas buried his face in his hands. My mother tried to murder my wife. We've arrested Mrs. Whitmore for attempted murder, Detective Morrison said. She's claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that she was trying to make a special recipe and accidentally used the wrong ingredient, but the evidence doesn't support that story. 3 days later, I sat in another hospital room, this time visiting Robert. He was awake and alert, though still weak. The doctors said he'd been incredibly lucky. "I'm so sorry, Alex," he said, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea what Patricia was planning. If I had known..." "It's not your fault," I told him. "You couldn't have known. I should have seen the signs. The way she talked about you, the resentment. I thought it was just jealousy, but it was so much more than that." Thomas squeezed my hand. We'd decided to move across the country, far away from the mansion and the memories. Robert was selling the house and moving to a smaller place. He said he couldn't live there anymore, knowing what had happened in that kitchen. Patricia was in jail awaiting trial. Her lawyer was trying to claim temporary insanity, but the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The research, the planning, the careful selection of poison, none of it suggested a moment of madness. "She destroyed our family," Robert said sadly. 30 years of marriage, and I never really knew her at all. I thought about that as Thomas and I drove away from the hospital. How well do we ever really know the people closest to us? How many secrets hide behind perfect smiles and family traditions? The cup with the pink roses was still in evidence, a delicate piece of china that had nearly been my death sentence. But I was alive, and Patricia's mask had finally slipped completely. Some family traditions, I realized, are better left broken.